says foxtail millet appears to be in the shortest supply, with most dealers already sold out. He states the bottom line is this: if you think you might want or need to plant summer annual forage grasses this year, buy the seed now before it's all gone. Last year's drought may have prevented severe Goss's wilt infestations in Nebraska corn, but a UNL Extension plant pathologist says don't let your guard down. The March, Nebraska farmer carries a warning from Tamara Jackson-Sims. Goss's wilt is here to stay. The corn disease continues to spread east and north in the Corn Belt and has become one of the top diseases of corn. As the best management practice, Jackson-Sims recommends producers plant hybrids that carry resistance to Goss's wilt. You can read more about the disease in the March, Nebraska Farmer. At last week's Triumph of Ag Expo in Omaha, we talked with Dr. Susanna Von Essen from the University of Nebraska Medical Center about pulmonary issues in today's farmers. You'll hear in our conversation the improvement hog farmers are seeing in their respiratory health and how manure may be able to protect you from lung cancer. Since planting season is around the corner, we started by asking Susanna about application precautions for farm chemicals.
Probably the farm chemical that poses the biggest risk to you is anhydrous ammonia. And if everything's working right, you're going to be fine. But if a hose breaks or something else happens where you get a face full of it, you may start coughing and wheezing immediately.
What are some of the other precautions you could take if you're just working around other types of chemicals? Are there things that you need to be aware of?
Well, there's some evidence that certain farm chemicals, certain pesticides, cause asthma. There's evidence from the agricultural health study suggesting that. So the best way to protect yourself is to follow all those rules that you learned when you took the classes so that you could buy the chemicals, those safety rules, wear the personal protective equipment they talk about in those classes, and you probably will be fine.
How common is asthma in farmers? Do you see it a lot?
We see it some.
Yeah.
Asthma is about as common in farmers as it is in other people.
Do they develop more as they go along, or not as much?
They have less asthma in childhood, and then they catch up to the rest of the population when they're adults.
Right.
So something probably happens when they take on the adult role, managing and running a farm, from exposures they have in their work. Some related to animal agriculture, some related to chemicals. We don't know for sure. It could be related to grain dust.
What are the problems with grain dust? What are the dangers?
The biggest risk is organic dust toxic syndrome. That is the most common risk.
And what does that do? What does it mean?
Well, you get a heavy grain dust exposure. Maybe you're cleaning a bin. That evening you think you're coming down with the flu. You have fever and chills and body aches and a headache. And all that can be from this inflammatory response that your body is making related to that heavy grain dust exposure.
So what do you need to do to prevent that? Is it just as simple as a mask?
Wear a respirator.
It's as simple as that?
It's as simple as wearing a respirator.
This grain that you're talking about, is it grain that has spoiled, or is it just normal grain?
It's more likely if the grain looks like it's spoiled, but it can happen just from normal grain.
If you look at the problems that hog farmers are having in barns, describe to me the evolution of how it used to be a problem and what kind of a problem it is now.
We used to see about 30% of hog farmers having respiratory problems. They would get chest tightness and cough, what we call the asthma-like syndrome, or they might get chronic bronchitis where they make a lot of phlegm. Now, we just aren't seeing as many in our clinical practices, like my pulmonary practice. Also, there just aren't any workers' comp claims being filed for respiratory problems related to hog farming.
Any hypothesis as to why that might be?
I think it's because ventilation's gotten a lot better in the barns. We know it has to be better for the pigs. We now have these big fans, the total ventilation systems, the curtains that go up and down. So I think that's made a positive impact on the respiratory health of the farmers as well. I'd like to test that. I'd like to get some funding and do the study, but I'm fairly sure that's true based on my subjective impression from being a pulmonary practitioner in Nebraska.
Talk to me about the lung cancer in farmers, because this is an interesting study in how manure may be valuable in some way.
Yet another way that manure can be good.
Right.
It seems to protect you. If you raise animals on your farm, it may protect you. It seems to have a strong protective effect actually against lung cancer. And it's probably from the endotoxin, which is from the cell membrane of E. coli and other gram-negative bacteria that are highly abundant in manure. You do also get this effect if you simply have row crops on your farm, because you have endotoxin in large amounts in grain dust from bacteria like Klebsiella that are common in stored grain.
Overall, what are some of the simple precautions that farmers can take to protect their respiratory system?
Anytime there's going to be a lot of dust in the air and you know the circumstance, wear a 2-strap dust mask, what's called an N95 mask. They're available maybe locally at your grain elevator, maybe from the veterinarian's office, from Gemplers, from maybe Tractor and Supply. Moldex is one brand. 3M makes a very nice, equally effective product that's made right in Valley, Nebraska. So you have lots of choices.